Margaret held the designer dress over the flames, watching it curl into ash. "This will teach her," she whispered. But when she opened the manila envelope that fell from the pocket, her hands trembled. There, in bold letters, was a name she never expected to see, and it changed everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe how this ends. Trust me, the twist will leave you speechless. Now let's get into it. Margaret Bennett had always believed that money bought respect. At 68 years old, she sat at the head of one of the wealthiest families in the country, living in a mansion that had been in the Bennett family for 3 generations. The estate sprawled across 15 acres of perfectly manicured gardens, with a main house that looked like something out of a European palace. Crystal chandeliers hung in every room, and the furniture was worth more than most people's homes. Margaret wore her wealth like armor, and she expected everyone around her to recognize her position. Her son Christopher had grown up in this world of privilege, but unlike his mother, he had a gentle heart. At 35, he ran the family's investment firm with quiet competence, making millions while somehow remaining kind to everyone he met. He was the type of man who remembered his secretary's birthday and always tipped generously. When he brought Lauren home 3 years ago and announced they were engaged, Margaret's perfect world began to crack. Lauren was everything Margaret despised. She came from a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a school teacher. She had worked her way through nursing school, taking double shifts at a hospital to pay her tuition. She wore clothes from department stores, not designer boutiques. Her shoes were practical, not fashionable. And worst of all, she seemed completely unbothered by the Bennett family wealth. She didn't gasp at the artwork or compliment the imported marble floors. She simply smiled and asked Margaret how her day was, as if they were equals. For 3 years, Margaret had tried to mold Lauren into a proper Bennett wife. She criticized her posture at dinner parties. She pointed out her grammatical errors. She bought her expensive clothes and then complained when Lauren seemed uncomfortable wearing them. Christopher would apologize to Lauren in private, hold her while she cried, and promise that his mother would eventually come around. But he never stood up to Margaret. Not really. He was too afraid of the woman who had raised him with an iron fist wrapped in expensive silk. Lauren, for her part, tried everything to win Margaret's approval. She learned which fork to use for each course. She read books about art and wine. She volunteered at the Bennett Foundation, working twice as hard as anyone else. But nothing was ever enough. Margaret always found something to criticize, some way to remind Lauren that she didn't truly belong in their world. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the Bennett Foundation's annual charity gala. This event was the highlight of Margaret's social calendar, a glittering evening where the city's elite gathered to see and be seen while pretending to care about whatever cause was fashionable that year. Margaret controlled every detail, from the flower arrangements to the guest list. And this year, she had very specific ideas about what Lauren should wear. Lauren walked into Margaret's sitting room that afternoon carrying a garment bag. Her eyes were bright with excitement, a rare, genuine smile on her face. "Margaret, I wanted to show you the dress I picked for the gala," she said, her voice hopeful. She unzipped the bag and pulled out a simple but elegant navy blue dress. It was tasteful, appropriate, and beautiful in its understated way. Lauren had saved for months to buy it, working extra shifts at the hospital where she still volunteered twice a week. Margaret looked at the dress the way someone might look at garbage on the sidewalk. "You cannot be serious," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "That looks like something from a clearance rack. The Bennett family has standards, Lauren. If you're going to represent us, you need to look the part." Lauren's smile faded. "It's a lovely dress, Margaret. It's elegant and appropriate. I bought it with my own money, and I feel beautiful in it." "Your own money," Margaret repeated with a bitter laugh. "What money would that be? The allowance my son gives you? Or did you save your little tips from playing nurse at the hospital?" The cruelty in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Something changed in Lauren's face. For 3 years, she had taken every insult, absorbed every criticism, and smiled through every humiliation. But in that moment, standing in Margaret's pristine sitting room with her carefully chosen dress, something inside her broke free. "I am a nurse, Margaret. That's not playing. That's who I am. And yes, I bought this dress with money I earned because unlike you, I know the value of working for something." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Margaret's face turned pale, then red. "How dare you speak to me that way in my own house?" she hissed. "Is it your house?" Lauren asked quietly. "Or is it the Bennett family house? Because last I checked, I'm a Bennett too." Christopher tried to mediate when he came home that evening, but the damage was done. Lauren retreated to their bedroom, and Margaret paced her sitting room, fury radiating from every pore. How dare this nobody, this girl from nowhere, speak to her with such disrespect? Margaret had built her entire identity around being the Bennett matriarch, the woman everyone envied and feared. She wouldn't let some small-town nurse with delusions of grandeur tear that down. The next morning, Lauren left early for her volunteer shift at the hospital. She still worked there every Wednesday and Friday, helping in the emergency room, despite having no financial need to work at all. Margaret waited until she heard the car pull away, then climbed the grand staircase to the wing where Christopher and Lauren lived. She walked into Lauren's dressing room like a general entering enemy territory. The navy blue dress hung in its garment bag, a silent symbol of everything Margaret couldn't control. She grabbed it roughly, and as she did, a manila envelope fell from the pocket and landed on the floor. Margaret barely glanced at it, too focused on her mission. She tucked the envelope under her arm and carried the dress downstairs, through the French doors and out to the courtyard, where a large stone fireplace stood for outdoor entertaining. Margaret had the household staff keep fires burning in the cooler months, and today was no exception. Flames danced in the fireplace, warm and inviting. But Margaret's intentions were anything but warm. She pulled the dress from its bag and held it over the flames. "This will teach her," she whispered to herself. "She needs to understand her place in this family. She needs to remember who has the real power here." The fabric caught quickly, navy blue twisted into black, then gray, then white ash. Margaret watched with grim satisfaction as the dress disappeared, feeding it into the flames piece by piece. Let Lauren come home and find it gone. Let her rage and cry. Maybe then she would learn some respect. When the dress was nothing but ash and memory, Margaret brushed off her hands and turned to go back inside. Then she remembered the envelope. She had set it on a nearby stone bench, and curiosity got the better of her. What would Lauren be carrying in her dress pocket? A love letter from Christopher? Some sentimental nonsense? Margaret opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. The first page made her freeze. It was a property deed. Her eyes scanned the words, not quite comprehending what she was reading. The Bennett estate, the address she had called home for 40 years. But the owner's name at the top wasn't Margaret Bennett or Christopher Bennett. It was Lauren Catherine Bennett. Margaret's hands began to shake. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of forgery. She flipped through the pages, her breath coming faster. But everything looked legitimate. Legal stamps, notary seals, lawyer signatures. The deed was dated 6 months ago, properly filed and recorded. Her home, her palace, her kingdom, it belonged to Lauren. Beneath the deed were more papers, trust fund documents, investment portfolios. And then, at the bottom, a letter. The handwriting made Margaret's heart stop. She would recognize it anywhere. It was her late husband's handwriting, distinctive and bold. Robert had been dead for 4 years, but his words reached out from the grave to shake her world apart. Margaret sank onto the stone bench and began to read. "My dearest Margaret," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then certain events have unfolded as I suspected they might. By now you know that I've left the estate to Lauren. I imagine you're confused, perhaps angry. Let me explain." The letter went on, and with each word, Margaret felt her understanding of reality shift. Robert explained how he had met Lauren 5 years ago, long before Christopher ever had. He had been downtown for a business meeting when he felt chest pains. He collapsed on the sidewalk, and Lauren, who had just finished her shift at the hospital nearby, rushed to help him. She performed CPR, called for an ambulance, and rode with him to the emergency room. She saved his life. Robert had been so struck by this young woman's composure and kindness that he did something unusual for him. He investigated her background, not to find dirt, but to understand who she was. What he found impressed him deeply. Lauren had grown up poor but honest. She had cared for her younger siblings when her mother got sick. She had worked multiple jobs to put herself through school. Every person Robert's investigators talked to described her the same way: kind, hardworking, genuine. When Christopher brought her home and introduced her as his girlfriend, Robert wrote, "I knew immediately who she was, and I knew that fate had brought our family something precious. But I also saw how you treated her, Margaret. I saw the coldness, the criticism, the need to make her feel small. It broke my heart." Margaret's vision blurred with tears, but she kept reading. Robert explained that as his illness progressed and he knew death was coming, he made a decision. He changed his will, setting up an intricate legal arrangement. The estate would pass to the woman with the kindest heart who enters the Bennett family. His lawyers had specific instructions to wait until after Christopher and Lauren married, then transfer ownership to her. The documents would be delivered to Lauren on her third wedding anniversary, which had been 6 months ago. "I did this not to hurt you, Margaret," Robert wrote, "but to protect what matters most. Lauren doesn't care about the money or the house. She never has. But she deserves to know that someone in this family valued her for who she is, not who you wanted her to be. She earned her place here long before she married our son, and I hope that someday you'll understand why I chose her." The letter ended with words that cut Margaret to her core. "You married into wealth, Margaret, just like Lauren did. But you forgot where you came from. You forgot that respect isn't about money or bloodlines. It's about character. Lauren has more character in her little finger than most people have in their entire being. I just pray you figure that out before you lose everything that truly matters." Margaret sat in the courtyard, surrounded by the ashes of the dress she had burned, holding papers that proved she owned nothing. Her hands shook so badly that the letter fluttered in her grip. Memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. Robert trying to talk to her in those final weeks, trying to tell her something important. Her dismissing him, too busy planning a fundraiser to listen. His disappointed face, his sad eyes. He had tried to warn her, tried to help her understand, and she had been too proud to listen. The sound of a car in the driveway made Margaret's head snap up. Lauren was home early. Margaret watched as her daughter-in-law walked through the garden, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Lauren stopped when she reached the courtyard and saw the ash in the fireplace. Her eyes traveled to the burnt fabric, and understanding dawned on her face. "You burned my dress," Lauren said quietly. It wasn't a question. Margaret stood, still clutching the papers. I found these," she said, her voice hoarse. Lauren saw what Margaret was holding, and something flickered across her face. Not anger, not triumph, just a deep, profound sadness. "So now you know," she said. "You knew?" Margaret asked. "You knew about this for 6 months?" "Yes," Lauren said simply. "The lawyers delivered the papers on my anniversary. Christopher doesn't even know. I never told him." "Why not?" Margaret demanded. "Why hide it? Why not throw it in my face every time I criticized you?" Lauren walked closer, and Margaret saw tears in her eyes. "Because I didn't marry Christopher for his money or his house or his name. I married him because I love him. And as crazy as it sounds, I wanted to be part of this family. I wanted you to accept me, Margaret. Not because I owned the estate, but because I earned your respect as a person." "I don't understand," Margaret whispered. "Robert's lawyers also gave me instructions," Lauren explained. "He set it up so I could transfer ownership back to the family trust at any time. He didn't want me to feel trapped. He just wanted me to know that someone saw my value, that someone believed I belonged here." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I was going to transfer it back eventually. I kept hoping that maybe someday you'd see me the way Robert did, that you'd treat me like family instead of an intruder." Margaret looked down at the ashes of the dress, then at the papers in her hands, then at this young woman who owned everything Margaret thought was hers. "I've been so foolish," she said, her voice breaking. "So unbelievably foolish." "You burned my dress," Lauren said again, and this time her voice cracked. "I bought that with my own money. I felt beautiful in it, and you burned it because you wanted to hurt me, to teach me a lesson about my place." She took a shaky breath. What place is that, Margaret? In my own home? The words hit Margaret like physical blows. She had burned property that belonged to the owner of the estate. She had destroyed something precious to someone who had every legal right to throw her out onto the street. And Lauren would have every justification to do exactly that. But instead, Lauren sat down on the stone bench and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Margaret realized she was witnessing something she had never seen before. Lauren's complete and total heartbreak. Not over the dress, but over the endless, exhausting battle to be accepted by someone who should have loved her. Margaret slowly sat down beside her. For several long minutes, neither spoke. Then Margaret said the words she should have said 3 years ago. "I'm sorry." Lauren looked up, her face wet with tears. Are you? Are you really?" "My mother was a seamstress," Margaret said suddenly. The words spilled out, unprompted. "Did you know that?" "She made clothes for wealthy families. My father was a mechanic. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I shared a room with my 2 sisters." She paused, staring at her manicured hands. "When I married Robert, I was so terrified that everyone would see where I came from. So I became the person I thought they wanted me to be. Cold, refined, untouchable. I built walls so high that I forgot there was a real person inside them." Lauren listened, saying nothing. "And then you came along," Margaret continued, "with your honest face and your kind heart, and you didn't care about any of it. The money, the status, the games everyone plays. You just wanted to be loved. And I hated you for it, because you were brave enough to be yourself, and I had spent 40 years being afraid to do the same thing." "Robert saw that in me," Lauren said softly. "He told me once that I reminded him of someone. I think maybe he meant you, the you that you used to be." Margaret finally broke down. The tears came hard and fast, years of rigid control dissolving in the face of a truth she could no longer avoid. She had become the very thing she once despised, someone who judged others by their bank accounts instead of their character. And in doing so, she had lost sight of what her husband valued most. When Christopher came home that evening, he found them still sitting in the courtyard, talking, really talking, for the first time since they had met. Margaret told stories about her childhood that she had buried for decades. Lauren shared her fears about never being good enough for the Bennett name. They cried together, laughed together, and began the long, difficult process of building something real. It didn't happen overnight. Margaret suggested family therapy, which shocked Christopher so much he nearly dropped his drink. The 3 of them spent months working through years of hurt and misunderstanding. Margaret had to learn to listen instead of lecture, to ask instead of demand. She had to confront the insecurity that had driven her to control everyone around her. 3 months later, Lauren wore a new dress to the Bennett Foundation Gala, one she had chosen herself, with Margaret's genuine compliment still ringing in her ears. During her speech that night, Margaret did something unprecedented. She publicly acknowledged Lauren not just as Christopher's wife, but as a true Bennett, someone who embodied the values that mattered most to the family legacy. The estate remained in Lauren's name. It became a symbol of something more important than ownership. It represented earned respect, chosen family, and the understanding that worth isn't measured in dollars or decades of residence. It represented the truth that kindness will always be more valuable than cruelty, and that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. One evening, months after everything changed, Margaret was going through old photographs when she found something that made her gasp. There, in a box of Robert's personal effects, were pictures she had never seen before. Robert at the hospital talking to Lauren. The date stamp showed they were from 5 years ago. There were several photos, clearly taken by a private investigator Robert had hired. In every single one, Lauren was helping someone, adjusting an elderly patient's blanket, kneeling down to comfort a scared child, laughing with other nurses. On the back of one photo, Robert had written in his distinctive handwriting, "This is what a Bennett should be." Margaret understood then what her husband had been trying to tell her all along. He hadn't chosen Lauren because of who she might become, with Bennett money and status. He had chosen her because of who she already was, someone who saw a stranger having a heart attack and didn't hesitate to help. Someone who worked extra shifts not for the money, but because people needed care. Someone whose first instinct was always kindness, even when it wasn't returned. Margaret framed that photo and put it on her desk, where she would see it every single day. A reminder that she had almost destroyed the greatest gift her husband had left her. Not the estate, not the money, but the chance to be part of a family built on something real. Wow. Margaret learned the hardest way that respect can't be bought or burned. It has to be earned. What would you have done in Lauren's position? Would you have forgiven Margaret? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. We post new stories every week that'll make you think, so subscribe and hit that notification bell. Remember, kindness always wins in the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.